if we orient to an external locus of control, the kind of car we drive or the job we have or where we live, all of that can be disrupted and sometimes having nothing to do with us at all. But if we orient to an internal locus of control, who we are, what we believe in, how we want to treat other people, that offers an incredible amount of stability in life.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Ashley, and today I'm joined by Annie Perrin. Annie is a spiritual counselor, therapist, executive coach, and facilitator who spent the first 16 years of her career as a psychotherapist before expanding into organizational culture and leadership. She has facilitated transformational programs and worked with leaders in organizations including Google, Apple, and PwC, and today leads her own practice, bringing those disciplines together to help people tap into greater wisdom, resilience, and compassion in the way they lead and live. Annie is also the co-author of Leading with Wisdom and Compassion, a leadership development curriculum focused on cultivating greater awareness, resilience, and humanity. And she also recently co-launched Third Thing, a library of microlearnings designed for leaders navigating complexity, uncertainty, and change. At the heart of her work is the belief that each of us has an innate capacity for wisdom, guiding us towards greater authenticity, purpose, and peace. I'm really excited for this conversation because we're going to be leaning into some questions that I think many of us wrestle with, regardless of where we are in the journey. So, with that, Annie, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for that kind introduction. I do want to note that the Third Thing that was recently launched is a collaboration with my longtime colleague and friend, Dana Asher.
Dana Asher. Well, there it is. So excited for that and excited to dive into that more as well. Endurance Diaries, though, as you know, is about our personal journeys, the pivotal moments and experiences that shape who we become. And when I look at the work that you're doing today, there's this really strong thread around understanding ourselves as the whole, bringing our whole self into, where we work, what we're doing, and tapping into those beliefs and feelings and values in that inner life. And so I really want to start there with you just to kind of lay the foundation here. Can you take us through a bit of your own journey and what ultimately led to the work that you're doing now?
That's such a great question. And I actually get asked that a lot. And one of my first answers is always, I never could have planned this if I tried.
Well, that's great to hear because that is the heart of this podcast, right? Is life doesn't go as we plan. And that's how we build the endurance to keep going. So it's very capturing of the heart and essence of this channel.
Great. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess if I really start at the beginning and go back to my childhood, especially as it relates to the concept of wholeness that you mentioned, I came up in a very large family. It was a very strict religious Catholic family. And there were many good things about my family. And there was also a lot of trauma and abuse in our home, in my family of origin. So I think that some part of me from a very young age always felt like maybe I was broken or maybe there was something terribly wrong with me. And I now know as an adult through a lot of my training that that's a protective mechanism that children use to keep themselves feeling safe. Because if we were to fully understand the limitations of the adults in our lives, it would be absolutely terrifying. So instead we think, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. And that's very empowering to a kid because then we can try and be better and maybe fix it and solve the problem. So I think that was a long, deep, painful thread throughout my life of really defaulting to there's something very, very wrong with me. And I I think that probably was an unconscious attraction to studying psychology and being involved in, my own healing modalities throughout my life. And I would say it wasn't until fairly recently that I've been able to really unlearn that deep learning and understand that, like every other human, of course I have my flaws and my shortcomings, but that fundamentally there's nothing wrong with me at my core.
Did you find that throughout that process, it showed up in all areas of your life, from school to work to social aspects? How does that kind of like belief about yourself show up and manifest?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It wasn't all bad, I have to say that, because, for example, in school and work activities, I tried really hard. I wanted to do well, to, please my teachers and all of that. So it worked well in those areas because I was always a good student. I was always a high performer in professional settings. And relationally, it works well sometimes because I was very attuned to other people and their feelings. And another way that I made myself feel safe was to always ensure that the other person was okay. And so a lot of people want to be around people like that. But that's where it starts to tip into at a cost to myself because I wasn't always able to include myself in the same care that I was offering others.
Yeah, I can see how. I mean, a couple of things there too, what you were saying just about high performance within those spaces in school and work and everything. If you're not enough or you're always doing something wrong, it's how can you perform your way into into that kind of worth, and almost kind of convincing yourself that if I'm good at this thing, then it means all these other things about me. And then I can almost kind of, fight that tension that I'm experiencing. And I think that shows up for a lot of us in ways where we have these ingrained beliefs from either from childhood or wherever it comes from, different circumstances in our lives or maybe traumas in our lives. And then that just stays kind of sticks with you.
Yes.
So when was it for you that you started working through that? Because then ultimately you build a career in this space and helping others come into their own healing journeys as well.
Yeah. I just want to emphasize a point you made, Ashley, which is that striving. I had and have a lot of like perfectionistic tendencies, like striving and then looking for the external validation that, oh yeah, I am worthwhile or I am good at something. And it wasn't until I really did some in-depth spiritual studies when I was training to be a spiritual counselor that I came in touch with some of the wisdom traditions, orientation toward wholeness, and that in some people refer to it as an impenetrable core. That's the true essence of who we are that can never be altered. That has little and nothing to do with what we do on the outside. So that was a turning point. But I guess the fuller answer to your question, I think I was very fortunate because I was a dancer and I started dancing at a young age. I still dance. And I think that kept me really healthy and in touch with a lot of aspects of myself that served me very well as a resource, as a support. So there was definitely the emotional expression involved, but also the confidence that I could rely on my body. And that was very empowering, I think, for me throughout my life and still is. So I think that was a huge piece of my healing. And then, I started therapy in my 20s. Definitely in graduate school when I was trained to be a therapist, there was a lot of inner work there. So it's been a lot of different things. I think the most transformative was when I studied at One Spirit Learning Alliance, which is the Interspiritual Institute that had the deepest impact in the shortest amount of time.
Mm. I'm going to ask you to elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, I know. I've been reflecting on that a lot about why is that? And I don't know that I fully know, but partially I think it was the first time that I was immersed in something that went beyond the personality or beyond my psychological makeup or defense mechanisms and tapped into something. I guess I could say deeper, or I could say transcendent, or both, maybe.
The word transcendence to me just came to mind as you were talking.
Yeah. Yeah. That there's something more than just our personality and what happened to us and our different styles and ways of coping. There's something that's a fuller expression of our deepest essence and that wholeness that we've spoken about. And that became available to me during that period of study. It's not like it's a constant state even now, but I have a reference point to note, to locate it as a resource. And that I think was probably the biggest transformative thing.
As you were working with clients as well, how much were you bringing that kind of approach into the work that you were doing, sitting across from people going through their own, processes and things that they're working through in that? How much do you bring that in, knowing how transformative it had been for yourself?
Yeah. I definitely now include it when I'm doing like early intake sessions with people,
Mm.
gathering some of their background and their history at the beginning. I definitely now include questions about how they orient spiritually. Um,
Mhm.
so I would never presume to work in that domain unless the person was actually wanting and willing to go there.
Sure.
But I definitely now inquire about what is your spiritual orientation? Do you believe in anything? Do you
Mm.
have hope for it? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I do include it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because people come from different, faith backgrounds or spirituality in that way. Is that something you can incorporate regardless of that kind of background?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I always say to people I work with, it's more important that I trust them than they trust me. So I will work with whatever the person themselves believes in as another resource in their life to support them and help them to be resilient, to show up at their best, and also to handle challenge and hardship.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know, again, I just think as we were talking here in my own, my own self and what my faith journey has meant to me in ways and how much I incorporate that and just how I'm seeing things, approaching things, perspective, like all of that. Right. And so for me personally, it is, incredibly important. And so it's interesting as well to just hear from the clinical work that you've done, integrating different practices and that to tap into more of that side, you know.
Yeah, definitely. If it's meaningful to the person, yes. Now there's so much amazing research, where spirituality and physics are starting to intersect, and just there's so many studies on what compassion does brain level and at a neurochemical level. Yeah, so it's kind of exciting. And even in my corporate work, I use slightly different language, but the principles are super helpful. I might say things like our best self or our highest self as opposed to, let's say, soul or, but there's still, to my delight, there's a lot of receptivity to a lot of these concepts.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you share that. Because also I think about conversations that just generally that we have with our peers, that oftentimes there are certain topics or there are certain places that you're like, should we go here? Should I not go here? Should I say this? Should I not say this? And what I found also in this space as well too is that there is more of this openness. Like I believe that people do want to have these conversations. They do want to go there. And it's just how do we kind of get there, and kind of create this space in a way that you do, Annie. How can I, use a language that you're more receptive to, and then it opens up that space for more dialogue.
Yes.
So I want to go there. You mentioned the work with different organizations. And so I want to transition and talk about that, where you go from this one-on-one work, bringing that into organizations, and how that kind of work at the individual self can ultimately impact where we work and the environments in which we work in that culture.
Yeah. So all of my work and all of my training has been grounded in human physiology, like just what's true about us as human bodies and brains and hearts, and also universal principles, whether they're based in spirituality or whether they're based in neuroscience. So wherever there are people, I feel like they apply, right? So, and again, it's sort of like what you were just saying so beautifully, which is you have to know your audience, and so you might shape them slightly differently, but the underpinnings are consistent throughout. Yeah. And a simple way of saying it is like, my work is grounded in like, oh, how do human beings show up as the best version of themselves? What's supportive of that? And what promotes thriving?
And how do you get there to show up as the best version of yourself?
Hmm. Well,
Is that the inner work? Is that paying attention to, thoughts and feelings and emotions and what's happening outside of that place? Because there's so much that impacts how it is that we show up, right, to work, where it's like even the smallest inconveniences, where if you're driving to the office and you spill your coffee, or you are in a argument with somebody on the phone, how that impacts you internally, and then how are you going to channel that on your colleagues?
yeah, I know. So hard. So in a body of work on resilience by Al Siebert, which you might be familiar with, he talks about research that says that the most resilient people orient to an internal locus of control.
Mm.
So if we orient to an external locus of control, like the kind of car we drive or the job we have or where we live, all of that can be disrupted and sometimes having nothing to do with us at all. But if we orient to an internal locus of control, who we are, what we believe in, how we want to treat other people, that offers an incredible amount of stability in life because no one can take that from you. And there's amazing people in history like Nelson Mandela, for example, that have been unbelievable living embodiments of that principle. So I think how we show up at our best more of the time, knowing that we're not going to be able to do it all the time because we're human. I think it's awareness, really knowing your inner landscape, and then it's intentional choice. Sounds
So
simple, really hard.
I was going to say, as for the next words, I was going to say it's so hard.
It's really hard. Yeah, it's really hard because all of our histories and all the things that we learned that are totally in our unconscious memory, where we predict the way the world's going to be. Yeah, it's super complicated.
Yeah. And even just how much I find, where if something comes up or something happens, it's like, all right, this looked like that thing from 5 years ago, from 10 years ago. And it's those stories. I heard this once. I thought it was pretty good because I was like, this is pretty true. Like the stories that we live in are the stories that we live out. And so what is the story that's inside here? Because then it's going to be expressed in different forms and manifest in different ways. And can I, reframe certain things that have happened? Can I create these new narratives? That rewiring, it's an ongoing work. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and I was like, sometimes I feel like I've reached this point, okay, I've healed from this thing, or I'm on the other side of this thing, and it's just a continual work.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. What you're describing, those stories, there's in a training that I've done for the last 5 years, which is called STARE, created by an amazing therapist named Julianne Taylor Shore, my teacher. And she taught me about something that's called the psychological floor. So when we're very young, our brain is really designed to be very energy efficient. It wants to use as little energy as possible. So when we're young, when we learn something, our brain stores it in our subcortical brain, which is not verbal, it's not conscious, to help us just automatically remember stuff. So, for example, if you're a toddler and you step on grass for the first time, your brain's like, oh my God, it's prickly, it's green, it's cold, and what is this? Whatever. But then the brain quickly, it's grass. Boom, it gets stored. You don't think about grass anymore. You know what it is. Well, the same thing happens with emotional learnings. So if you grew up in a family where when you spilled your milk, you got a swift swat on the hand and maybe you were scolded and yelled at and called a name or whatever, your brain also helps you remember that. So it might be a memory like mistakes are super dangerous. Don't make a mistake. And that also gets stored away and it's not in our prefrontal conscious mind. So we're all walking around on this set of complicated learnings where we're making predictions about things based on what we learned. And if we simply trying to think our way out of it with our prefrontal cortex, it doesn't really talk to that part of the brain. They don't talk in the same language. So that's why in this work with sensation and imagery and sounds even are really helpful because that does tap into the part of the brain that actually is holding that memory.
What is the self-trust part of that?
The self-trust part is based on a body of work, I think, called coherence, which means everything about us makes sense. So I can trust the wisdom of my system. So
Mm.
if I'm having a particular response to something, even if it seems really odd, I can trust that there's wisdom in my system because it's that response is based on one of those subcortical emotional learnings.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
And also, it's an encouragement in a way. You really can't think your way. You can't just think your way out of everything because
not everything.
I've tried that. And
Me
somehow I
too.
still have the thoughts.
Well, you can even know and you can witness yourself and you can think, I know that this response I'm having isn't about the thing that's happening now. Like you can observe it. But
Yeah.
if you really want to update the learning, the subcortical brain has to be activated and online.
What's interesting too, I think, in the spirit of high performance and somebody who's always striving and want to get better, want to get better, want to get better, it's like if there's new ways that I can help myself or I can show up better in these places, like I want to do that kind of work. In the same way you think you're healed, you're not. You're like, all right, well, what do I got to do? Like to do it. So I have a question though on that. In the organizations that you've worked with, you're working with high achieving leaders in these, major companies. What have you learned like what can happen when somebody is very successful externally and always striving for that next thing, always reaching that next, milestone, that next level up. What happens whenever you're on that ladder, but you're disconnected from what it is that's happening internally?
Mm. Yeah. In some ways, our corporate culture and our broader culture is set up that we're disconnected.
How so?
Well, how many of us would actually sign up to work the way a lot of high performers work? 60, 70, 80 hours a week, working through vacations, working on the weekends. I mean, I can't say generally for every single person, but I will say based on my experience that in order to do that, you sort of do have to disconnect from parts of yourself to make that okay. And I think for some people that becomes a huge dilemma.
Mm,
And it's actually, and this is my opinion, but I actually don't think it's fit for purpose. I don't think it generates the best results. So one hypothesis or question I offer my corporate clients is how can we evolve to a more humane way of working and still get excellent results? My belief is we'll get better results if we can infuse our workplaces with more humanity.
mm,
I think there's a fear or an old belief perhaps or an old paradigm that this is the kind of work that's required to drive profits and be excellent. I think that's outdated. And I think those paradigms are starting to crumble, and we're kind of seeing that all around us. And it's a scary leap to make. But I do think that not people, I do think that some of our cultural Western norms are are still very binary. It's either you're good to your people or you're hard driving and profitable. And again, I just think that's outdated thinking.
I wonder, beyond all of that, going even a bit deeper, just as individuals living in a certain kind of society and culture as well, how much of what it is that we see around us when we think about goals and success and what that looks like, or this kind of, I don't know, these expectations that drive that, where, okay, I can't even give myself permission to take any time off. I need to be working this 60, 70 hours. I need to be doing this for the company because I need to get this and need to get that. How much do you think that influences it, how we define success and what we feel like we're constantly lacking? Like, I do
Mm,
think that oftentimes we can live out of a place of lack because we're like in this comparison world.
yeah. I think it's a huge component of what drives that working culture, that always striving for more. I mean, we live in a capitalistic society, so it relies on our consumerism and our belief that the more we earn, the happier we'll be, and the more stuff we have, the more happy we'll be. So yeah, I think that's a huge component of it. And there is a reality, like we need to earn money, we need to be able to support ourselves and to house ourselves. So all of that is real, um, and important to survive. And yet you're asking a great question, which is like, well, how much is enough? And that that is a question I hear, especially from executives that are further along in their career, where they've invested a lot in sort of going up the corporate ladder, and there's a kind of looking back quality of like, well, how much do I actually really need, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I wonder, where that, I mean, just to kind of go back to the top of the conversation, right? How much comes from our own childhood experiences in a way, in these kind of beliefs maybe that we have about ourselves that then drives us. And I don't know, maybe if we, take time to go tap into that inner self and go down these different journeys and ways, and a lot of the work that you're doing and bringing into this space and creating for others to tap into that and maybe think differently or challenge the ways that they saw something or saw themselves, see themselves, then perhaps that could influence or shift something in maybe their approach, and I don't know, create more of this fulfillment and purpose, which I do believe that oftentimes we see things on the outside, and that's not always the reality, right? Like you can see someone super successful and they feel like totally unfulfilled, even though on the
Yeah.
outside it looks like they have everything in the world.
Yeah, 100%. I can tell you a funny personal story because as you know, I recently just moved into a new apartment, and so I've been unpacking and I have a lot of clothes. And even when even when the movers moved me in, they made a few comments like as they were carrying my clothes in, and I know exactly where that comes from. I'm one of 10 children in my family.
Wow.
I always wore hand-me-downs. I have one memory where my mom bought me something new, one in my life.
Mm.
So I totally know that buying myself clothes is like filling a hole. And I know that. Do I still buy clothes? Yes.
Yes.
I
Exactly.
love clothes. Do clothes make ultimately fulfill me and make me happy? Of course not. But they do make me happy because as you know, being a dancer and a performer, I think of clothes as like costumes. So yeah. So
But so to your point, it's like, that you're doing that and you have that awareness anyways. And okay, you're still going to do it because yes, it still brings you that but I think that's the difference though, Annie, right? Is that you having that awareness and making those choices anyways. And I think that there's often times where it's like we can just go through things and not realize the kind of defaults or patterns or whatever that are happening. And then it's showing up, showing up, showing up again. And you're like, well, why? So
right. Yeah,
kudos. I mean,
thank you for letting me off the hook. That's very generous. But I do think your point about fulfillment is an important one because it's been well researched that unequivocally what fulfills humans is to contribute
mm,
and basically to be in service to others or something beyond ourselves. And I do think that's what we all, well, maybe not everybody, but I think most people do long for that. Like we want to contribute.
we want to contribute 100% and want to feel needed, I think, too.
Yeah. And
Right.
it's, yes. And especially, we haven't talked about this yet, but I know that you talk about it a lot. The relationship between adversity and our gifts,
Mm,
right? So I have a friend and a teacher who she's a dancer. She said, nobody gets up in the morning and decides to change because everything's going so great. It's like, that's true. So,
wisdom.
yeah. So in Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, that kind of
Mm,
arc of transformation,
mm,
it's a beautiful, simple arc of how after a tragedy or a trauma or an adversity that we receive some sort of gift and then we bring the gift back to the community, to our community. So I believe that we all have, the reason I thought of that was because I think in addition to purpose, I believe we all have unique gifts to offer to help.
It makes me a little emotional thinking about it because I see that just in so many ways, or even conversations I have, or friends, people that I know as well that have gone through significant challenges, adversity, etc., and how they've been able to use that then to, to help others along their way or create this sense of purpose for themselves. And it becomes a gift then that they can give on. And it just keeps giving, keeps giving, keeps giving. It's a beautiful thing. And that's, I believe, the power of our journeys and our stories. A lot of the reason why I created this space here, you know?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, it comes from someplace, right? It wasn't just one day I'm like, hey, I'm going to create a podcast. And so then today it's like I get to sit here with you and be able to learn from your own story and the work that you're doing and the impact you're having on others. And that is just a ripple effect. It's a gift that we can continue to give on.
definitely. Yeah.
What continues to inspire you to show up, to bring more of this work to life and to help people in their journeys?
Mm. Well, I love my work. I love working. Um, for me, it's a very energizing, joyful, fulfilling activity. And one of the sources of inspiration, that I rely on probably the most are the people I work with. So I don't know if this is similar to your experience on the podcast, but I learn so much from my clients, and I'm just really blown away by the beauty of the human spirit. And talk about resilience, just the stories of resilience are so inspiring. So I feel honored to companion people in that way. And then the second resource is learning itself. I find that continually being curious and learning is such a source of support in my work. And I have had amazing teachers. So I mean, Diane Burke from One Spirit Alliance, and uh to there were many there, but she is an important teacher in my life. And then Julianne Taylor Shore, for sure. So to be able to learn from these incredible sources of wisdom and compassion and science is probably the greatest inspiration in my work.
I'm pausing because I'm thinking about it's people, and it's those people along the way, whether they're colleagues or mentors, that can have such a strong impact and influence and inspire us to continue to keep going and to challenge us and stretch us. And what we can do collectively together is so powerful. And that's the beauty. I think that's ultimately the dream when I think about work and meaningful work, doing it alongside people that, that are so meaningful as well to yourself and your own journey. That's the dream.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and I'm very fortunate because even though I have my own business and my own practice as like a sole practitioner, I have long-standing, amazing colleagues that I collaborate with. I mentioned Dana Asher earlier. We've collaborated in many iterations of our career, and I'm just so blessed and fortunate to work with her, almost every day. And then some of my corporate clients, like at PwC, for example, uh, feel more like teammates to me, really, than a client, because we've developed such close working relationships and friendships. So I'm beyond grateful for that.
So good. Thank you so much for being here and having this conversation and taking us down your own path and ways, and in a lot that you shared here, the insights. And I think so much is applicable to each and every one of us, right? Regardless of where you are in your own journey, there's so much that you can gather, that you can think about, consider, check in with yourself, and ask yourself certain questions that could take you down that inner reflection in ways, and being able to apply some of these principles as well to just like in our everyday lives. It doesn't have to be some whole big thing. So
No, just curious about what's present.
if there's one thing you could leave us with here, Annie, what would it be?
Trust the wisdom of your own system. And then this is more in the spiritual realm, but my teacher and mentor, Diane Burke, um, offered me this prayer that I love. So if you're a person that prays, or it says, Dear God, but you could insert whoever you believe in, help me to see the truth about myself, no matter how beautiful it is.
Wow. that's that's uh
That's a doozy.
that is
Mm,
that is. I'm gonna write that down. Definitely not the same version that we tell ourselves.
right. And when we say the truth about myself, it's truth with a capital T, right?
Mm.
The true essence. We all know that we have our human shortcomings, but this is the transcendent version of ourselves.
I love it. It comes full circle here in the conversation. So
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
it's really beautiful. Thanks so much, Annie. Really, this has been such an honor to have you here. And I really appreciate you sharing all your insights and wisdom. And for those listening as well, to learn more about you and the work that you're doing, where could they go to learn more?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Ashley, for having me. It's been really fun, and I love your questions and your curiosity. So I have a website. It's annieperrin.com. So you can go there, LinkedIn, of course. And there is a new offering I'm a part of that if I may plug it, it's called the Hearth. And it's a new offering that's going to be, it starts in January 2027, but there's a informational gathering in September. Um, and it's a 1 year community for people that are interested in being a part of a spiritual community for support during these kind of disruptive times.
And that's Hearth. Is it spelled heart with an H?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. That sounds great. Thank you so much. This has been so good. Again, really appreciate you being here, and I'm excited to continue to follow along.
Likewise. Yeah, it's been really great. Thank you, Ashley.